A disgusting rat and rodent infested mess. Hi, I'm Scott Ott. No, I'm not talking about this episode of Right Angle with Bill Whittle and Stephen Green, but rather what President Trump recently tweeted and said about Representative Elijah Cummings' district in Baltimore, Maryland. Gentlemen, as you probably know by now, the president was under fire from Representative Cummings for the conditions at detention centers near the southern border. The president decided to turn that around and strike back as if Representative Cummings was directly attacking the employees of the Customs and Border Protection people there. And so he defended them and at the same time said that Cummings should spend more time focusing on his district, which is far worse and more dangerous, and literally used that phrase, Cummings' district is a disgusting rat and rodent infested mess. If he spent more time in Baltimore, maybe he could clean up this very dangerous and filthy place. Cummings hit back saying, I spend every day in my district. And then the mayor of Baltimore spoke up and talked about what beautiful areas of the city and how the president wasn't being helpful.
Can't wait to move.
Oh, my goodness. So a lot going on here, Stephen Green. Some of it is just the normal partisan tit-for-tat spat. But President Trump has really opened a wound here. And before we get to the part about how that wound is driven by his virulent racism, is this the way to start a conversation about urban blight?
Well, number one, Donald Trump wasn't trying to start a conversation. He was trying to stir up trouble in ways that he think will benefit him and the Republican Party going into 2020. So let's put all this conversation nonsense aside. It would be nice to have a conversation, but people who shout racist at everything aren't capable of having a conversation. So I think the Trump approach is the right one, at least until the Democrats have been stung as badly as they've been stinging Republicans with these stupid baseless charges decade after decade. And until they've been burned as badly as they've been burning everybody else, this nonsense isn't going to come to a stop. So let's just dispense with this whole idea of a conversation. We're just going to have to shout these SOBs down like they've been doing to us for the last 50 years. So that aside,
let's follow up with that racist issue, because the kerfuffle that we just got through was the president attacking 4 women of color who are rookie representatives in Congress.
No, Scott, you're following the MSN's line, and it's wrong.
That's my job
wrong.
here.
He did not attack any 4 congresswomen by name. He hinted very broadly that there were exactly 2, and those would be Omar and Tlaib, however you pronounce her last name.
Tlaib, yes.
There was absolutely nothing in those tweets that would indicate AOC or what's her name from
Ayanna Pressley.
Thank you. I think from Michigan, or Pennsylvania, I mean. Wherever she's from.
I want to say Mississippi, but I can't remember.
Anyway, yeah, so the press said, oh, we must mean these 4 because they're the squad and it's racist. No. From his words, if you go to Ann Althouse's blog, she deconstructed that series of tweets. He mentioned nobody by name, and every indication was that he was talking about 2 in particular. So let's not parrot the mainstream media's thing here. Let's stick to what we can actually know or parse out from what the president said. I don't like living in an age where we have to parse out the president's tweets, but I didn't set this stage. But back to your actual point, which was what again?
Well, Steve, he uses terminology that with racial overtones
right.
that, frankly,
okay.
And let me throw something else in there, because the terms associations with rats, and he often uses the term infestation. Frankly, it sounds like some of the early Nazi propaganda films talking about Jews.
Please. No. Absolutely not. And, I've spent quite a bit of time in Baltimore. My dad's best friend lived right off the harbor. Nice townhome. He did very well for himself. Had a nice townhome just literally, I think, a 2 or 3 minute walk away from the harbor and all the restaurants there. Very gentrified. The National Aquarium is there. I think I was at the National Aquarium the first summer it was open, because Dad and I would go out to Baltimore almost every summer for 6, 7, 8 years in a row, and we'd do Washington D.C. while we were there, and all the rest of the great touristy stuff when you're a kid. But if you got more, if you walk 2 minutes to the harbor, it was great. It's beautiful. It's some of the best real estate on the East Coast. You go 2 minutes in any other direction, literally by foot, and you're going to get your throat slit. And this is 35 years ago. These were the conditions when Baltimore was much better than it is today. It is completely fair to call out the conditions in that city, and it has nothing to do with race. It has to do with the fact that, like Detroit, like Flint, like so many other cities around the nation, you put Democrats in charge of it for decade after decade, and this is the conditions you get. Is it racist to say that California is at risk of serious mosquito-borne illness? No, it's an actual fact, because they can't keep the damn city clean. The garbage is piling up. The rats are infesting the place. Yes, that is a fair word to use. And the mosquitoes are biting the rats. And it's actual plague conditions in Los Angeles. If you think Baltimore is bad, Baltimore is tiny. Baltimore is a sliver compared to Los Angeles. And LA is on the exact same path, just on a much bigger scale. This has nothing to do with race. It has everything to do with bad governance. And that bad governance is committed 98% by Democrats in charge of these cities.
Bill Whittle, let's just accept Steve Green's argument that this isn't a racial issue. The other issue that's being pushed by the left at this point is saying, well, yes, Mr. President, if you really think that Baltimore is a rodent-infested mess, then why don't you do something about it? And then people on the right immediately said, well, this isn't a federal issue. This is a local issue. This has to do with municipal governance. And as Steve pointed out, that's run by Democrats. However, Bill, the federal government has a pretty heavy hand in America's inner cities, from welfare to public schooling to public housing and other aspects of the federal government's reach into there. Doesn't President Trump have a moral obligation, now that he's called this out, to step in and say, and here's what the federal government's going to do about it?
No, needless to say, he doesn't have that moral obligation. The moral obligation that he may have had, he fulfilled by simply bringing the subject up. If the Democrats' argument is, okay, true enough, we don't know how to govern a city, and everything we touch turns into rodent-infested, disgraceful, disgusting sewers, then why don't you come in and do something, Mr. President? If that's going to be their argument, that's an argument I would run on. I really would. I would say, well, it's an admission you don't know what you're doing anyway, so let's see if we can find more people like me and figure out how to run Baltimore. But the thing, I disagree with Steve on this in terms of being like something calculated for 2020. I think that this is the genius of Donald Trump. And when I say genius, the more I see this, the clearer it gets. I don't think this is four-dimensional chess genius. It's not that kind of thing at all. The genius of Donald Trump is that he has the skin, the thickness of hide, to immediately state the obvious without being cowed into not stating the obvious. He's the only politician that I've seen in the last 30 years who didn't have Stockholm Syndrome, who's not acting like he's got a gun to his head. When somebody says the conditions, when somebody has the audacity to be representative of Baltimore and complain about conditions on the border, to come back with this knee-jerk reaction, which I'm sure is exactly what it is the perfect answer to this. It's the perfect answer to this. Who do you think you are? Who do you think you are? Which one would you rather spend a night in, Mr. and Mrs. America? Would you rather spend a night in a Baltimore City shelter, or would you rather spend the night in a detention center on the southern border with Mexico? Which one do you think would be there? And when he uses terms like rat-infested, he is using the kind of language that accurately describes the situation, which is why the left is in a constant panic. This is why Twitter has saved the nation. I think Twitter's done an enormous amount of damage, but Twitter has allowed the President of the United States to speak directly to the American people. And when he says that Baltimore is a rat-infested hellhole, he's right. And when he says the reason it's a rat-infested hellhole is because of this representative, he's right. And now he's put this guy on the defensive in the same way that he put Hillary Clinton on the defensive by having those 5 women show up at debate number 2, the 5 women who'd been assaulted by Bill Clinton, and all of a sudden the Republican war on women argument is out the window because Donald Trump has the savvy and the media sense and like I said, the hide, the ego. His skin is thick enough to take this kind of stuff. That's a racist thing to say. It's not a racist thing to say. And I know you're going to say it's a racist thing to say anyway. I don't care. We all know it's true. And by stating something that everybody knows is true, which he does quite a lot, he brings down more and more and more rage from the left. But folks, this is the entire thing. The destruction of this country and all of the stuff that we see and reparations and socialism, all of this, it's all self-inflicted. It's all self-inflicted. There's not an army with guns making us agree to these things. We agree to these things because the left has convinced us that this is what decent people do. Decent people do these things, and if you don't do the things that we want you to do, then you're a racist and you're a misogynist and an Islamophobe and all the rest. And good people don't want to be called that. So they keep their head down and they just kind of nod. No, I don't want anybody to call me a racist and so on. And Donald Trump doesn't care. By saying that the Democrats have no clothes, what he's basically doing is he's giving everybody in the country permission to say he's absolutely right. How can you possibly be a representative of inner city Baltimore and complain about conditions anywhere on this planet? Anywhere. You don't get to complain about Mogadishu if you're the person responsible for inner city Baltimore. And it's not a joke, it's a frickin' tragedy. And Donald Trump should continue on this. If this story goes for another couple of days or hours, you got to say, listen, the people who are being killed in Baltimore are black people. That's who's being killed by this representative and his policies. There are 8,000 Americans killed every year in these inner city war zones, and they're all run by Democrats. Don't you dare accuse us of racism. You're the one that's killing 8,000 black people a year, and you're doing it to line your own pockets. That's the conversation that has to be had in order to save the country. And when I heard his response to this, I just said, again, it's not genius in the traditional sense of the word. It is a fundamental understanding of how to argue and how to use people's moral to use people's unearned moral authority against them. He's basically doing this kind of judo thing. It's like here comes this guy charging at him with the big, you don't care about brown people, Mr. Trump. Our community situation on the border is just shameful, and he just gets out of the way and lets that big heavy mass just keep on going, and say you're one to talk about living conditions. The guy is really brilliant, because he understands how simple this game is. If you speak the truth, you destroy the Democratic Party. If you have the courage to say what's actually true, then they're finished.
Hey, Scott, can I throw in just two small things very quickly? Number one, when Hitler was talking about Jews being lice or rat-infested, he was talking about not actual neighborhoods in decline because of bad government. He was talking about your tailor. He was talking about your doctor. He was talking about your accountant, guys who ran very clean shops. It was lies. Pure lies. Trump here is telling the truth. And an item I just saw in one of the papers this morning, Baltimore, inner city Baltimore, has a higher rate than Guatemala or El Salvador, the two countries that people are fleeing the most from to escape murder rates. Baltimore is a worse run city than Guatemala or El Salvador as a country.
And as I pointed out in this firewall I did called Number One with a Bullet, if you take inner city crime statistics out of the American average, then America has a lower murder rate than Belgium, Switzerland, France, lower rate than those countries.
Gotta fix our cities. People are dying.
That's it.
And the reason I brought up that infestation language is because it was something I heard from a commentator on CNN this morning. And I thought that, as Steve's pointed out, that he fundamentally misunderstood the use of that word, because the Nazi propaganda films were referring to the Jews themselves as like rats infesting our country. President Trump is talking about literal rodents infesting a city. He's not saying that the people are the rodents. He is saying that rats are rodents and they're there. President Trump, I'm not trying to justify what he says and how he says it. I'm a lot of times just trying to understand what he may be thinking and what it means for our country. When you turn around and say to a representative from Congress, your district has problems, well, the congressman's not really in Washington, D.C. to fix the problems of his district. However, President Trump doesn't completely fire a miss when he says that, because congressmen in local districts have a great deal of sway over the political party in those districts. They are tied in through their contributions and through their personal leadership and their network of influence to the city representatives and the county representatives, the people who sit on city councils, the mayor. All of those people are really kind of in the orbit of Representative Elijah Cummings. And he could have some influence just by his own moral force of personality if he really wanted to tell the Democrats locally, look, you want to still get these campaign contributions that I've been funneling from the federal level into your local campaigns? You need to start making this city look like something that I can come home to and not have to lock my doors at night. You got to make this city start looking like something that children can grow up here without having to worry about getting exotic diseases from rodents or getting knifed in the streets, as Steve indicated. And so I don't think Trump was making a mistake in going after Cummings. It's better to pin it on one person and use him as a conduit to reach a larger problem. The other thing is the allegation that President Trump is racist because he attacked Representative Cummings and then by extension, so-called, the people of his district, I think is completely false. President Trump's not a racist. President Trump insults anybody that he can. He insults anybody who tries to embarrass him. And so if you come after the president and basically say you're responsible for deplorable conditions on the border in detention facilities that are supposed to be treating children with good hygiene and health and safety, and you try to embarrass him with that, and you think he's not going to turn around and try to embarrass you, you just don't understand President Trump. You've not been paying attention for the last couple of years. It's not a racist issue. Just the president will not be embarrassed without turning around and trying to embarrass you. That's right. And finally, there is a federal role in the destruction of America's inner cities, and it's been exacerbated, and the accomplices of that are our major city mayors and city councils. There's a city council president in Baltimore whose name is Brandon Scott, and he said the president, and I'm reading from a news story here, he said the president was in a better position than anyone else to help, but if the president did not help, then his words would only motivate those in Baltimore to do so themselves. And here's the quote: "Whenever anyone says we're done," meaning Baltimore is done, "we come back." That's Baltimore's story. Ladies and gentlemen, if anything can come of this ridiculous kerfuffle between Elijah Cummings and the President of the United States, maybe it's that the people of Baltimore, specifically the people in those rat-infested neighborhoods, which is not all of the city, but is certainly an important part of the city, those people will say, you know what? If the federal government and this jackass president aren't going to do anything to help us, we will help ourselves. And maybe, I doubt it, but maybe, just maybe, Donald Trump was thinking, yeah, let's see if we can get them ticked off enough so that they'll help themselves. For Bill Whittle and Stephen Green, I'm Scott Ott. Thanks to the members at BillWhittle.com for making Right Angle possible.